Potstickers pack all the flavors of your favorite dumplings into pre-made gyoza wrappers that are easy to fill and seal. The thin wrappers cook quickly as they pan fry, our favorite method to deliver piping hot filling and a crispy brown bottom. For these vegetarian potstickers, we're leaning on savory mushrooms to add bulk and umami-rich flavors.
By the way, this is a lesson from ATK Classes on the America's Test Kitchen app. With ATK Classes, you'll get access to a wide variety of lessons filled with masterful techniques, helpful videos, and step-by-step photos. From knife skills and making hand-rolled pasta, to baking and frosting incredible cakes, and so much more.
So something that makes potstickers extra special is having a delicious side sauce. Today I'm going to be making a scallion dipping sauce, which is just a super easy, flavorful stir-together sauce. I'm going to start with a soy sauce base. Here I have a 1/4 cup, and everything just goes into the same bowl. So I'll be building it all here. In addition to that, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar as well as 2 tablespoons of mirin. This just adds a punchy and slightly sweet base. We prefer to use unseasoned rice vinegar in this sauce. In addition to that, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of water. This just adds some balance to keep things from tasting too sharp. So a little bit of water just helps mellow things out and round them out a little bit. And I'm also adding a teaspoon of chili oil. This just adds a really beautiful flavor and a slight kick. Who doesn't love that? And I'm also adding 1/2 teaspoon of toasted sesame oil. And finally, I'm adding 1 minced scallion. That's the white and the green parts, and I'm just going to stir that in. It adds some nice color and allium aroma. And just going to set that aside. We won't need that until later. So a main component of this filling is going to be Napa cabbage, which is a really refreshing and delicious vegetable that adds a lot of juiciness to any filling. I'm going to need 3 cups of cabbage in total. Here I have 2 cups of minced cabbage already, and I'm going to prep out the last cup. And to mince the cabbage, I like to make long strips lengthwise first. I turn them on their side and sort of line them up in a row, chop finely this way. So I'm getting little cubes. And notice how I'm keeping my knuckles curved, and that way I'm just running up against the knuckles and never hitting the tips of my fingers. Then I just like to run over what I've already chopped. Getting a really fine chop is going to be helpful for creating a cohesive filling. And if you'd like to, you can also certainly do this in the food processor, just to speed things up a little. So that's pretty finely chopped, and just going to add that to the rest of my cabbage. So I have all 3 cups here. I am setting them in a colander because I actually want to drain out the liquid. Napa is a pretty watery vegetable, and we don't want that going into the potsticker itself. So I need to extract that first. And to do that, I'm going to salt the cabbage. Here I have a 1/4 teaspoon of table salt, and the salt is going to pull out all the water from the cabbage. So just stirring that in to coat, and that's going to take about 20 minutes to pull out all the moisture. So while my cabbage is salting, I'm going to prep the other main ingredient, which are mushrooms. Mushrooms are going to add a lot of volume, but also a meaty texture and flavor to the potstickers. So here I have 8 ounces of white mushrooms. These mushrooms have been washed and dried. And to trim the mushrooms, I take off a little bit of the woody end. This part is exposed, so sometimes it dries out a little. And then quartering the mushrooms. To make it easier, once I've cut it in half, I lay it on its flat side. And the size of the mushrooms don't matter so much as the weight, since we'll be breaking them down. And I want to break the mushrooms down even further using a food processor. This is just going to give it a sort of blitzed texture that will really be cohesive in the filling. But I don't want to add my mushrooms whole into the food processor. I want an even cut. So I'm starting with some smaller quartered pieces that will then be broken down further. And I'm looking for the mushrooms to be chopped fine, about the size of the Napa cabbage. So that'll take about 15 pulses or so. And I like to check on the mushrooms halfway through. There's still a couple of big pieces, so I'll keep going. And this looks good. It's about the same size as the Napa cabbage. And just like the Napa cabbage, mushrooms do also contain moisture. And for the mushrooms, I'm actually going to cook them to release the moisture and let it evaporate off. So to do that, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil to a large 12-inch nonstick skillet, and I'm going to cook that on medium-high. So my oil is shimmering, and I'm just going to add my mushrooms directly in. And similar to the napa, I'm adding a 1/4 teaspoon of table salt to draw out the moisture. And I'm just going to continue to cook this until it begins to brown slightly and clump together, and I see no more residual moisture. That will take about 5 to 7 minutes. So it's been over 5 minutes and my mushrooms are thoroughly dried out. There's absolutely no moisture or water in the pan. And I'm just going to transfer this to a large bowl. These need to cool so that they don't burn through our wrappers. That'll take about 15 minutes or so. So my cabbage has been salting for about 20 minutes, and you can see a lot of moisture has dripped down. All of that would have ended up in our pot stickers, which would make them bland and waterlogged. So I'm glad I got that out. But sometimes moisture can still stay trapped in the leaves even though it's been dripping. So to be extra cautious, I like to further squeeze the cabbage, pressing down with a rubber spatula just to get out any extra liquid. So that feels pretty good. And now I'm going to build everything into my bowl with the mushrooms. They're fully cooled down now. And to this mixture, I'm going to be adding my seasonings and my flavorings. Now, we worked super hard to get all of the moisture out, so I don't really want to add too much back in. So instead, all of the seasonings I'm working with are super concentrated in flavor and don't add a lot of liquid, but add a big punch. To start, I'm adding 4 teaspoons of soy sauce. Soy sauce is a really concentrated condiment, adds a lot of savoriness. I'm also adding a teaspoon of fresh grated ginger, as well as 1 minced garlic clove, 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and 4 minced scallions. It just continues to add some bulk and a nice fresh flavor. And to bind all that together, I'm adding in 2 egg whites. Egg whites have a lot of protein and they're going to add a tenderness to the filling, keep it cohesive. And once it's cooking, it's going to puff up slightly and almost like a souffle and really create this tender, luscious, and silky filling. And now that that's stirred together, I'm just going to cover it in plastic wrap and let it chill for about 30 minutes or up to 24 hours. I'm just looking to firm up the filling slightly so that it's easier to pack into the pot stickers and so that it's more cohesive. So now I'm ready to fill and shape my pot stickers. Today I'm working with gyoza wrappers. So gyoza is the Japanese name for pot sticker, and these pre-made wrappers are really helpful because they're thin, sturdy, and easy to work with. And look for wheat-based wrappers that don't contain any egg. These will be a little bit sturdier. And if you're looking for them at the store, they usually come in a package like this. Sometimes they can also come frozen. So this recipe makes 24 pot stickers, but I'm going to be working in batches. So I'll start with 4 wrappers. And the wrappers are thin and dry out quickly, so you want to keep them covered. I use a damp towel. And the store-bought wrappers can sometimes run a little dry around the edges, so it's helpful to brush some water along the edge to make them easier to seal. I just use my finger for this. And this is just room temperature water. A little goes a long way, almost like finger painting. And now that the wrappers are prepped, I'm ready to fill them. Because I added soy sauce in, that's additional salt. So you might get a little bit of extra liquid that comes out, so you can just push the filling to the side. And to each wrapper, I'm adding a scant tablespoon of filling. I'm using a mini cookie scoop, but you can also use a regular tablespoon. And to fold these, I'm keeping it super simple, just a half moon shape. So I use my fingers to pack the filling in slightly if you feel like it might leak out. And I like to start from the center when I fold. That just creates a nice anchoring point, and then pressing firmly around the edges. You really want to get rid of any air pockets just in case it bursts in the pan. If you feel like the edges are drying out slightly, you can re-wet it a little bit. Those wet edges are really helping adhere, almost like a glue. And the half moon is the most simple fold you can do on pot stickers, and it's really effective. If you want some more complex pleats, you can also check out our technique video. And now that the edges are sealed, I'm just going to gently flatten one side, so pressing it flat with my fingers. This just creates a nice flat surface for even browning later. So repeating that with all of my pot stickers. And I'm just going to transfer these to a baking sheet where they will rest while I work on the remaining pot stickers. And again, these pot stickers dry out quickly, so I'm going to cover them with a damp towel to keep them hydrated. And I'm going to repeat the process for the remaining wrappers. So 4 at a time and continuing on until I reach 24. You can assemble everything now, but you don't actually have to cook them right away. You can refrigerate them for up to 24 hours or keep them in the freezer for up to 1 month. So I've made all 24 pot stickers and now I'm ready to cook them. I'm just going to keep them covered with my damp towel while I prepare my skillet. So I'm using the same large 12-inch non-stick skillet that I used for cooking my mushrooms. There's no need to dirty a second pan, and that's cooled down, so I'm just going to give that a quick wipe. So today we'll be using a pan frying method for cooking our pot stickers, and that utilizes both crisping and steaming. Using a nonstick pan is really important to prevent sticking, and to further prevent that, I'm also going to brush on a tablespoon of vegetable oil. I'm just brushing that all over a cold skillet. Notice how it applies evenly. If I were to heat up my skillet first, it would begin to pool in the center immediately. So still working with a cold pan, I'm going to start placing my pot stickers down on the surface. And this just makes it really easy to reach your hands in there and space them out, versus in a hot pan that can be a little scary. And I'm just working with a half batch, so that's 12 pot stickers. I want to be careful not to overcrowd the pan, which can prevent browning. And it's okay if they overlap a little bit. Now that my pot stickers are placed in, I'm going to start crisping the bottom on medium heat until it's golden brown. That'll take about 3 to 4 minutes. So it's been a little over 3 minutes and the bottoms of the pot stickers are nice and golden brown. At this point, I'm going to add the steaming element. So I'm reducing the heat to low and adding in a half cup of water. And then immediately covering that with a lid. The water creates a steamy environment, and that's what's going to cook the top of the pot stickers as well as the filling. And I'm looking for most of the water to be absorbed, and the wrappers should be slightly translucent. That'll take about 8 to 10 minutes. So it's been a little over 8 minutes, and my pot stickers are looking slightly translucent on top, so that means they're sufficiently steamed. And you'll see most of the water is evaporated off. And they might deflate slightly when the lid comes off, and that's totally okay. Now I'm just going to bump the heat back up to medium. This is just re-crisping the bottoms. They got a little bit soft while they were steaming, so I just want to reinforce that crisp edge. That will take about 1 to 2 minutes. And now the bottoms are re-crisped. You can see that beautiful color. I'm going to transfer these to the plate just to remove any excess oil. So the first 12 pot stickers are done. So now you have a couple options. You can brush on more oil and repeat the process, or chill or freeze them and enjoy them later. And I'm going to plate these up so that I can enjoy them now. I have my scallion dip that I made earlier, and they're going to be a perfect sauce for these pot stickers that we worked so hard on. And they just look so crispy and delicious, and I really cannot wait to dig in. Those wrappers are so crispy, and then it just reveals a nice juicy filling, and it's so delicious. The mushrooms really add that depth, and I get a nice substantial bite that's super flavorful. Pan frying ensures these pot stickers get a deep brown sear, but salting and draining the Napa cabbage and cooking the minced mushrooms get rid of excess moisture and concentrate their savory flavor. A quick but complex dipping sauce adds a salty, sweet finish.
Now that you're on a roll, why not take the next step? Download the America's Test Kitchen app and start learning with ATK classes today.